The Keltharan merchant ship drifted in the endless black of space with 17 holes punched through its metal skin. Captain Vex Thor looked at the damage reports on his screen and felt his 3 hearts sink lower with each line he read. The Krethic raiders had hit them hard and fast, tearing through their shields like they were made of paper. Now those same raiders circled the wounded vessel like hungry predators waiting for the killing blow. Vex's Thor's main eye scanned the bridge, where his crew worked frantically to keep life support running. Sparks flew from a damaged console in the corner. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. His navigation officer Pelissa clutched her broken arm while still trying to operate her station with the other. They were merchants, not warriors. Their small cargo of medical supplies and farming equipment was hardly worth dying for. But the Krethic didn't care about that. To them, any ship was a target. Any crew was sport. The communication officer turned to face Vex Thor with fear in all 6 of her eyes. Her voice trembled when she spoke through the translator chip embedded in her throat. She told him that she had sent distress calls on every frequency the damaged systems could manage. She told him that most of the galaxy was too far away to help. She told him that only 1 ship had responded. Vex Thor asked which ship it was. The communication officer's skin changed color in the way that Keltharan bodies did when they felt terror. She said it was a human ship. The bridge went silent, except for the groaning of stressed metal and the hissing of air leaking from damaged seals. Every member of the crew knew about humans. Everyone in the galaxy knew about humans. They were the newcomers who had arrived in galactic space only 20 years ago. They were the species that every government had warned their citizens about. They were the ones who had been labeled as unpredictably violent by the Galactic Council after the incident at Proxima Station. Vex Thor remembered the stories that traveled through every merchant route and trading post. Stories about human ships that didn't negotiate. Stories about human warriors who fought with a savagery that shocked even the most aggressive species. Stories about how humans measured revenge not in proportion to what was done to them, but in measures that made entire governments think twice before crossing them. But Vex Thor also looked around his bridge at the 23 crew members who depended on him. He looked at the engineering team struggling to keep the oxygen flowing. He looked at the sensors, showing the Krethic warships charging their weapons for another attack that would finish what they started. He told the communication officer to accept the human response. The reply came faster than Vex's Thor expected. A human voice filled the bridge, female and calm as ice, despite the chaos the sensors surely showed. The woman identified herself as Captain Linda Hayes of the United Nations ship Defiance. She said she had received their distress call. She told them to hold their position. She said that help was coming. The Krethic must have intercepted the transmission because their attack stopped. Vex Thor watched on his damaged sensors as the 7 raider ships pulled back into a defensive formation. They were afraid. Even pirates who made their living terrorizing merchant vessels knew better than to be caught attacking a ship when humans arrived. Vex Thor wanted to feel relieved but couldn't. He had heard too many stories. He had seen the warnings posted at every civilized port. Humans didn't play by galactic rules of engagement. Humans didn't understand proportional response. Humans didn't believe in the calculated warfare that every other species practiced, where conflicts were resolved with minimal casualties and maximum profit. His tactical officer studied the sensor data and reported that the Krethic were trying to decide whether to run or fight. The officer said their weapons were charged, but their engines were hot, ready for a quick escape. The officer said the human ship would arrive in less than 3 minutes. Vex Thor asked if their own engines could jump them out of the system. The engineering team leader shook his head, his translator clicking with frustration. The engines were dead. The jump drive was offline. Life support was running on backup power. They couldn't run even if they wanted to. The 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. Vex Thor watched the countdown on his screen while the Krethic raiders maintained their formation. He wondered what the human ship would look like. He wondered if the stories were true. He wondered if he had just traded one death for another by calling for help from a species that might be more dangerous than the pirates attacking them. The sensors screamed a warning 1 second before the human ship arrived. There was no gradual approach, no deceleration burn, no hailing frequency. One moment, the space ahead was empty. The next moment, a warship materialized less than 5,000 kilometers away. Vex Thor stared at the image on his main screen. The human vessel was smaller than the Krethik flagship, but it looked nothing like any ship he had ever seen. Where most species designed their ships for speed and elegance, the human warship looked like it had been built by someone who expected to get shot at constantly and had decided not to care. Angular armor plates covered every surface. Weapon emplacements jutted from the hull at dozens of points. Heat radiators glowed red-hot, even in the freezing void of space. The ship's name was painted across its hull in white letters. UNS Defiance. Vex Thor thought the name fit perfectly. His communication officer reported that the Krethik commander was hailing the human ship. She played the audio so the bridge crew could hear. The Krethik commander's voice was full of false bravado, as he told the humans they were interfering with a legitimate salvage operation. He ordered them to withdraw immediately, or face the consequences of engaging with the Krethik supremacy. The human response was immediate and cold. Captain Linda Hayes cut off the Krethik transmission mid-threat. Then she opened a new channel, narrow beam, directed only at the Krethik commander's flagship. Her voice was calm and measured when she told the raiders they had 30 seconds to withdraw from the system. She said that after 30 seconds, anyone still present would die. She said there would be no further warning. Vex's Thor heard the Krethik commander laugh through the still-open channel. The raider leader told the human she was outnumbered 7-1. He said humans were primitive and didn't understand galactic warfare. He ordered her to stand down. The channel went dead. Vex Thor counted the seconds in his head. At 25 seconds, he saw the human ship's weapon ports open. At 28 seconds, he saw targeting lasers paint every Krethik vessel. At 30 seconds exactly, the UNS Defiance fired. The weapons the humans used were nothing like what Vex Thor had seen in 30 years of traveling galactic space. Most species used energy weapons that heated their targets, or particle beams that disrupted molecular bonds. The human ship fired solid metal slugs that moved so fast they seemed to teleport from the gun barrels to their targets. 8 trails of superheated air marked the path of the projectiles across the vacuum, ionized particles glowing in their wake. 4 Krethik ships exploded instantly. The metal slugs punched through their hulls and detonated the fuel cells inside. The ships didn't have time to activate their emergency systems or eject their crew pods. They simply ceased to exist, replaced by expanding clouds of debris and frozen atmosphere. 3 more ships survived, but just barely. The railgun rounds had torn through their engine sections, leaving them drifting without power or propulsion. Their life support systems flickered weakly. The 7th ship, the flagship where Commander Jalkar had been laughing just moments before, had begun its retreat a fraction of a second too early. The slug meant for its engines instead destroyed its weapon systems. The ship was intact, but completely defenseless, unable to fight back or protect itself. Vex Thor looked at the chronometer. The entire engagement had lasted 2.3 seconds. Captain Linda Hayes' voice came over the open channel again. She ordered her crew to cease fire. She told them to prepare rescue shuttles for immediate deployment. She said medical teams should stand by to treat wounded prisoners. Vex Thor's tactical officer stared at his console in disbelief. The officer said the humans were launching shuttles toward the damaged Krethik ships. The officer said the humans were going to save the pirates who had been trying to kill everyone just moments ago. Through the viewscreen, Vex Thor watched as small craft detached from the UNS Defiance and flew toward the crippled raider vessels. Each shuttle carried medical equipment and rescue personnel. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, cutting through damaged hulls to reach trapped crew members, stabilizing the wounded, evacuating those who couldn't survive without immediate aid. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Linda Hayes sat in her command chair and watched the rescue operation proceed. Her executive officer, Commander Ryan Blake, stood beside her with a troubled expression on his face. He asked her quietly why they were saving the enemy. He reminded her that the Krethik had been about to execute the Keltharan civilians. Linda took a sip from her coffee cup and set it down with careful precision. She said that yes, the Krethik had been about to commit murder. She said that was exactly why they had stopped the attack. She said that stopping murder didn't require becoming murderers themselves. Ryan didn't look convinced. He said that every other species in the galaxy would have simply destroyed all the raider ships and moved on. He said galactic warfare doctrine called for eliminating threats efficiently. He said mercy was seen as weakness by most governments. Linda turned to look at her executive officer with eyes that had seen too many battles. She told him that what other species thought about mercy was their problem, not hers. She said humans didn't measure their actions by what others expected. She said they measured their actions by what they could live with when they looked in the mirror. The rescue operation took 40 minutes. The human medical teams pulled 37 Krethik survivors from the wreckage. 16 were seriously wounded. 4 were critical. All of them received the same level of care that human crew members would have gotten. The Defiance's medical bay, designed to handle combat casualties, easily accommodated the influx of prisoners. Commander Jalkar was among those brought aboard. His armor was scorched, and he had a broken leg, but he was conscious and alert. The human medical team sedated him, set his leg, and moved him to a recovery room under guard. When he woke 3 hours later, he found himself in a clean bed, with his wounds properly treated. A human guard sat outside his door, armed but not hostile. Linda Hayes came to see him that evening. She dismissed the guard and sat in a chair beside his bed. She asked him how he was feeling. Jalkar stared at her with his 4 eyes, trying to understand what kind of game she was playing. He said his leg hurt, but the medication was helping. He said he didn't understand why he was still alive. Linda nodded, as if she had expected the question. She said he was alive because his crime was piracy, not mass murder. She said if he had managed to destroy the Starweaver and kill its crew, then he would be dead too. She said humans believed in proportional response. Jalkar made a hissing sound that his translator rendered as bitter laughter. He said he had heard all about human proportional response. He said the whole galaxy had heard about what happened at Proxima Station. He said humans had destroyed 17 military installations in response to a single accident. He said thousands had died. Linda's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped to a temperature colder than the space outside. She asked him if that was really what he thought happened. Jalkar said it was what everyone knew happened. The Valorian cruiser had accidentally fired on a human colony ship. The humans had responded by crippling the entire Valorian defense network. It was the perfect example of human brutality and lack of proportional response. Linda shook her head slowly. She told him that wasn't what happened at all. She said the Valorian cruiser had deliberately targeted an unarmed colony ship carrying 342 civilians. She said the Valorians had called it a warning shot, but the trajectory data proved it was an execution. She said the humans had tracked down every officer aboard that cruiser, every commander in the chain of authority, every official who had authorized the attack or covered it up afterward. Jalkar asked what the humans did to them. Linda said they arrested them. She said they put them on trial in front of judges and juries. She said they presented evidence and allowed the accused to defend themselves. She said the ones who gave the order to fire were convicted of mass murder and sentenced to life in prison. She said the ones who tried to cover it up got shorter sentences. She said the ones who were just following orders but could have refused got probation and were discharged from service. Jalkar's translator chip struggled to process his confusion. He asked about the 17 military installations. Linda explained that those installations had been involved in a coordinated campaign of harassment against human civilian shipping. She said the humans had given the Valorian government 3 months to shut down the harassment. She said, when it continued, they disabled the installation's weapons, destroyed their ammunition stockpiles, and left everything else intact. She said not a single Valorian died in those strikes. The Krethik commander lay back against his pillow and tried to reconcile what she was telling him with everything he thought he knew about humans. He said the Galactic Council had labeled humans as unpredictably violent. Linda smiled, but there was no humor in it. She said the Council was right about the unpredictable part. She said humans were unpredictable because they operated on principles that most species didn't understand or practice. She said other species calculated acceptable losses and fought wars for profit or territory. She said humans fought when they believed something was right and stopped when justice was served, not when the math worked out in their favor. Jalkar asked what would happen to him. Linda stood up and moved toward the door. She said he would be transferred to the nearest Galactic Council station to stand trial for piracy. She said his surviving crew would receive medical care until they were well enough to join him. She said the families of his dead crew members would be notified and would receive compensation from his seized assets. She paused at the door and looked back at him. She said he had made choices. She said he had chosen to be a pirate. She said he had chosen to attack defenseless merchants. She said those choices had consequences. Jalkar said he still didn't understand humans. Linda nodded and said she knew. She said that was why he lost. Then she left him alone with his thoughts and his healing leg and his complete confusion about how the most dangerous species in the galaxy could also be the most merciful. News traveled fast in galactic space. Within 2 days, every major government knew about the Starweaver incident. Within a week, the story had reached every trading post, every merchant guild, every military academy in known space. The details varied depending on who was telling it, but the core facts remained the same. A human warship had destroyed or disabled 7 Krethik raiders in less than 3 seconds, then immediately began rescuing the survivors. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. They needed to understand what had happened and what it meant for their existing policies regarding human interaction. Captain Vex Thor of the Starweaver received a formal summons to testify before the full council. He made the journey to the council station with mixed feelings of honor and dread. The council chamber was enormous, built to accommodate the hundreds of member species with their vastly different physical requirements. Some delegates floated in tanks of liquid. Some required high-pressure environments. Some existed as energy patterns projected into the physical realm. The chamber's environmental systems created dozens of different habitable zones, all within sight of the central testimony platform. Vex Thor stood on that platform and felt thousands of sensory organs focused on him. He had never been the center of this much attention. He had never wanted to be. Council Speaker Talvreen addressed him first. The ancient crystalline's body refracted the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. The speaker's voice resonated through a dozen different translation frequencies simultaneously. The speaker said that Vex Thor had sent a distress call, knowing that only a human vessel was in range. The speaker said that Vex Thor had knowingly summoned the species that the council had labeled as the most dangerous in known space. The speaker asked him to explain his reasoning. Vex Thor clicked his mandibles together nervously. He said he had no choice. He said the Krethik were going to kill his entire crew. He said he had 23 people depending on him to make the right decision. He said that when the choice was between certain death and possible danger, he chose possible danger. The speaker asked him why he was still alive. Vex Thor described what he had witnessed. He described how the human ship had appeared without warning. He described how Captain Linda Hayes had given the raiders exactly 30 seconds to leave. He described how the railgun rounds had turned 4 ships into debris clouds and crippled 3 more. He described how the humans had immediately launched rescue shuttles to save the very pirates who had been trying to commit murder. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Some delegates expressed disbelief. Others demanded to see sensor logs. Vex Thor provided everything his damaged ship had recorded. Councillor Thunder spoke next. The massive Gravoid's voice made the entire platform vibrate beneath Vex Thor's feet. The councillor said that this behavior conflicted with established human patterns. The councillor said humans were supposed to be violent savages who destroyed first and asked questions later. The councillor said the council's own analysts had predicted that any human vessel responding to the distress call would simply destroy all ships in the area and sort out who was innocent afterward. Vex Thor said the analysts were wrong. He said the humans had known exactly who was innocent and who was guilty before they fired a single shot. He said their sensors and tactical systems were far more advanced than anyone had estimated. He said Captain Hayes had told him later that her crew had identified the Starweaver as a merchant vessel, cataloged its damage, determined which ships had caused that damage, and developed a targeting solution that would disable the raiders without destroying them. All in the time it took for her to deliver her 30-second warning. Another counselor, a flowing Aquarian named Velshara, asked what Captain Hayes had said to explain her actions. The counselor wanted to know if the humans had demanded payment or political concessions for their rescue. Vex Thor clicked his mandibles in the Keltheran equivalent of a headshake. He said Captain Hayes had asked for nothing. He said she had explained her actions with a single sentence that Vex Thor had memorized word for word. He repeated it exactly as she had said it. The human captain had said that they don't kill because they can. They kill when they must. And understanding the difference is what separates civilization from barbarism. The council chamber fell silent. Delegates consulted with their advisors. Translation systems worked overtime to ensure the nuance of the statement was properly conveyed across hundreds of languages. Speaker Talvreen asked if the rumors about human violence were false then. The speaker asked if humans were actually peaceful, and the council had misjudged them entirely. Vex Thor considered his answer carefully. He said no. The humans were exactly as violent as the rumors suggested. He said they might even be more dangerous than the rumors indicated. He said the human warship had weapons that could destroy entire fleets. He said their tactical response time was measured in fractions of seconds. He said their accuracy was perfect, and their mercy was calculated. But then he said something that made every delegate lean forward in attention. He said humans were not savages. He said they were the most dangerous kind of warrior, the kind who chose when to fight and when to show mercy. He said they understood that true strength meant having the power to destroy and the wisdom to preserve. Counselor Thunder asked if human mercy was just strategy then, a way to manipulate other species into lowering their guard. Vex Thor said no. He said he had spent time talking with Captain Hayes and her crew while they repaired the Starweaver's critical systems. He said he had watched them interact with each other and with his own crew. He said human mercy was genuine compassion, the sincere desire to help others and prevent unnecessary death. But he said it came with conditions. The speaker asked him to explain. Vex Thor said that if you were innocent, if you were the victim of aggression, if you were simply trying to live your life in peace, then human mercy was absolute and freely given. The humans would risk their own lives to save you. They would share their resources without expecting payment. They would stand between you and danger without hesitation. But if you chose to be a predator, if you attacked the weak, if you decided that violence and cruelty were acceptable tools, then you would discover that human mercy had limits. And beyond those limits was something that made every form of warfare practiced by every other species look gentle by comparison. Counselor Velshara asked what happened when humans encountered true evil, when they faced enemies who couldn't be reasoned with or reformed. Vex Thor was quiet for a moment. Then he said he had asked Captain Hayes that same question. He repeated her answer. Captain Hayes had told him that humans had a saying. They said that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph was for good people to do nothing. She said, humans refused to do nothing. She said when they encountered true evil, when they found beings who existed only to cause suffering, when they met enemies who would never stop hurting others, then humans would stop them permanently and without regret. The speaker asked if that meant humans would commit genocide against species they deemed evil. Vex Thor said no again. He said humans didn't judge entire species. They judged individuals and organizations based on actions and choices. He said the Krethic raiders were facing trial, not execution. He said the Valorian officers who murdered civilians were in prison, not dead. He said humans believed that anyone could change, could choose to be better, could learn from their mistakes. But he said they also believed that choices had consequences, and that those consequences should be proportional to the harm caused, not to what was convenient or profitable. A junior counselor from a species Vex Thor didn't recognize asked how the council should proceed. The counselor asked if humanity should be welcomed into galactic society or kept at arm's length. Vex Thor looked around the chamber at hundreds of species who had built their civilizations on calculated violence, acceptable losses, and profitable conflicts. He thought about his crew who were alive because one human captain had decided their lives mattered. He thought about the Krethic pirates who were alive because that same captain had decided even their lives had value. He said the council should revise its assessment of humanity. He said humans were unpredictable by galactic standards because they operated on principles most species had abandoned or never developed. He said they fought for reasons beyond profit or territory. They fought for ideas like justice and protection of the innocent. They stopped fighting not when they had gained an advantage, but when the situation was resolved fairly. He said that negotiating with such a species was actually simple. You dealt with them honestly. You kept your word. You respected the innocent. You refrained from cruelty. You took responsibility for your actions. And if you did all of that, then humanity would be the best ally anyone could ask for. But if you lied, if you betrayed them, if you hurt those they protected, then you would learn that calling for help from Earth came with a price, just not the price paid by those who made the call. 3 months after the Starweaver incident, the Galactic Council finished their review of humanity's place in galactic society. The process had been long and contentious. Some delegates argued that humans should be given full membership and all associated privileges. Others insisted that humanity's unpredictable nature made them too dangerous to trust. After countless debates and hundreds of testimony sessions from beings who had encountered humans, the Council reached a compromise. They issued a revised advisory on human interaction protocols. Captain Linda Hayes sat in her ready room aboard the UNS Defiance, reading the new advisory on her datapad. The ship was currently on patrol in the Outer Rim territories, far from the political maneuvering of the Council, but not beyond its reach. Commander Ryan Blake stood nearby, waiting to see her reaction. Linda made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. She turned the datapad, so Ryan could read it. The Council had changed humanity's classification from unpredictably violent to selectively interventionist with extreme prejudice capabilities. Ryan read the designation and shook his head. He said it sounded like something written by a committee, trying to please everyone. Linda scrolled through the rest of the document. The Council had created detailed first contact protocols for any species encountering humans. They had established guidelines for requesting human assistance. Most interesting, they had developed a threat response scale that attempted to predict human reactions to various situations. The scale had 3 levels. Level 1 covered intimidation or harassment. The expected human response was a warning, followed by disabling of weapons systems if the harassment continued. Level 2 covered attempted violence against civilian targets. The expected human response was immediate neutralization of threats, while preserving enemy lives where possible. Level 3 covered successful violence against civilians or allied forces. The expected human response was listed as total destruction of hostile forces with no quarter given. Ryan asked if the scale was accurate. Linda set down the datapad and considered the question. She said it was close, but missing something important. She said humans didn't really operate on a scale. They operated on principles that sometimes looked like a scale from the outside, but were actually more complex. Ryan asked what she meant. Linda explained that the Council was trying to make human behavior predictable by creating rules and categories. But human decision-making didn't work that way. Every situation was different. Every choice depended on context, intent, capability, and a dozen other factors that couldn't be reduced to a simple 3-level scale. She said that 2 situations might look identical on paper but result in completely different responses based on subtle differences. A pirate who threatened civilians but surrendered when confronted would be arrested and tried. A pirate who kept fighting even after being offered the chance to surrender might be killed in the battle. Both started as level 2 situations but ended differently because of the choices people made. Ryan sat down and asked if the council would ever really understand humanity. Linda looked out the viewport at the stars sliding past in faster-than-light travel. She said maybe. Eventually. She said humanity had spent thousands of years learning these lessons themselves. She said Earth's history was full of wars fought for the wrong reasons, atrocities committed in the name of justice, and peace achieved through understanding what justice actually meant. She said other species were on their own journeys. Some would learn faster than others. Some would never learn at all. But humanity's job wasn't to teach them or force them to change. Humanity's job was to be an example, to show that a different way was possible, and to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Ryan asked what happened when being an example wasn't enough. Linda's reflection in the viewport showed the hard expression that came from years of combat command. She said that when being an example failed, when protection failed, when mercy was thrown back in their faces by beings who saw compassion as weakness, then humans would do what they had always done. They would fight. They would win. And they would make sure the lesson was learned well enough that it didn't need to be taught again. 46. Her communicator chirped, interrupting the conversation. Lieutenant Peter Grant's voice came through clear and professional. He reported that they were receiving a distress call. A civilian freighter was under attack by unknown hostiles approximately 12 light minutes from their current position. Linda and Ryan exchanged glances. Here it was again. Another test of whether the Council's new protocols meant anything. Another chance for the galaxy to see what human mercy actually looked like in practice. Linda ordered all hands to battle stations. She told the helmsman to plot an intercept course. She told weapons to prepare targeting solutions for the moment they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. She told communications to send a message to the freighter. The communications officer asked what message to send. Linda said to tell them that help was coming. The ship's alert klaxons sounded as crew members rushed to their stations. The Defiance was a military vessel, built for combat, crewed by professionals who had trained for this exact scenario. Within 90 seconds, every station reported ready status. Linda settled into her command chair and pulled up the tactical display. The freighter was a Talasian bulk hauler, carrying refined metals. The attacking ships were reading as Orion Syndicate raiders, a criminal organization known for stealing cargo and selling crews into slavery. 3 raider vessels against 1 unarmed freighter. Ryan reported that the freighter had significant damage and was venting atmosphere from at least 2 sections. He said their engines were still functional, but their weapons systems were offline. He said the raiders were preparing to board. Linda asked how long until intercept. The helmsman said 6 minutes at maximum speed. Linda did the math in her head. 6 minutes was too long. The raiders could board the freighter, slaughter the crew, and potentially escape before the Defiance arrived. She asked the engineer if they could push the engines harder. The engineer said they could run at 110% for short bursts. He said it would stress the systems, but nothing would break. Linda authorized it. She told the helmsman to get them there in 4 minutes. The communications officer reported that the raiders had detected their approach and were hailing them. The officer asked if Linda wanted to respond. Linda said no. She said if the raiders wanted to talk, they could do it after they stopped attacking civilians. Ryan asked if they should at least warn the raiders to back off. Linda looked at the tactical display showing the freighter's life support systems failing. She said the raiders had made their choice when they opened fire on an unarmed ship. She said warnings were for people who might not understand the situation. She said these raiders knew exactly what they were doing. 4 minutes felt like hours. Linda watched the tactical display update every second. The raiders managed to attach a boarding tube to the freighter's hull. Syndicate soldiers began cutting through the airlock. On the freighter, the crew was trying to seal themselves in the cargo bay, the only section still holding atmosphere. The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3,000 kilometers from the engagement. The sudden transition from faster-than-light to normal space created a wash of electromagnetic radiation that lit up every sensor in the area. The raiders knew immediately that they were no longer alone. Linda didn't waste time on speeches or warnings. She had 4 minutes to think about what she was going to do. The raiders had kept attacking, even after the Defiance was detected. They had kept trying to board, even knowing a human warship was incoming. They had decided that whatever they could steal in those 4 minutes was worth the risk. They were wrong. Linda gave the order to fire. The Defiance's railguns spoke with voices of thunder. 3 shots, 3 targets, 3 direct hits. But Linda hadn't targeted engines or weapons this time. She had targeted the boarding tube attached to the freighter, the raider command ships, and the raider vessel furthest from the freighter. The boarding tube exploded, severing the connection and saving the freighter crew from immediate danger. The 2 raider command ships were hit dead center. Their reactors breached. Their crews killed instantly. The 3rd raider ship tried to run, but the railgun round caught it amidships and tore it in half. Total engagement time was 4.1 seconds. Total enemy survivors was 0. Ryan stared at the tactical display. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he quietly asked why she hadn't tried to disable them, like she did with the Krethik raiders. Linda kept her eyes on the display. She said the situations were different. She said the Krethik had been stopped before they killed anyone. She said they had surrendered immediately when confronted. She said they had shown through their actions that they understood they were beaten and were willing to face justice. She said the Orion Syndicate raiders had kept attacking even after they knew the Defiance was coming. They had kept trying to board even with a human warship minutes away. They had decided that killing the freighter crew was worth the risk. They had made their choice. Ryan said the Council's scale would classify both situations as Level 2, attempted violence against civilians. Linda said the Council's scale was wrong then. She said humanity didn't measure situations by categories. They measured them by choices and intent, and the safety of the innocent. She said every situation deserved to be judged on its own merits. The communications officer reported that the freighter was hailing them. The captain was Talasian, his voice shaking with relief and shock. He thanked them for the rescue. He asked if there was anything his crew could do to repay them. Linda told him to make repairs and continue on his route. She said there was no debt for doing the right thing. 6 months after the Starweaver incident, the galaxy had changed in small but significant ways. Human patrol routes now covered 3 times the territory they had before. More merchant vessels requested human escorts. More civilian ships called for human help when pirates threatened them. And more criminals thought twice before attacking targets that might bring human warships down on their heads. The Galactic Council watched these developments with mixed feelings. Some delegates saw humanity as a stabilizing force, reducing piracy and protecting trade routes without demanding political control. Others worried that humanity was becoming too influential, that their brand of justice was spreading beyond their official territory. A few quietly suggested that perhaps the Council should adopt some human principles into galactic law. Captain Vex Thor sat in his quarters aboard the newly repaired Starweaver, reading a message that had arrived through official channels. It came from Earth's Unified Naval Command, stamped with enough security clearances to make it clear this was important. The message was brief and written in simple language that the translator had no trouble rendering into Keltharan. The message thanked him for his testimony before the Galactic Council. It said his words had helped humanity understand how other species perceived them. It said the Keltharan merchant fleet had been added to Earth's protected convoy list. It said any Keltharan vessel in distress should feel free to contact human forces without hesitation. It said there was never a price for asking for help, only for those who made help necessary. The message was signed by Admiral Christine Howell of the Unified Naval Command. Vex Thor clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. He saved the message to his personal files and then to the ship's official records. This was something worth keeping. Something worth showing to other captains who might someday face the same choice he had faced. Aboard the UNS Defiance, Captain Linda Hayes was dealing with a different kind of message. The Galactic Council had formally requested that she testify about the Orion Syndicate engagement. Some delegates were concerned that humanity had used excessive force. They wanted to understand why she had killed the raiders instead of capturing them like she had captured the Krethik pirates. Linda read the request twice, then called Ryan to her ready room. She showed him the message and asked his opinion. Ryan said the council was trying to fit human actions into their predetermined categories again. He said they wanted rules they could follow, protocols they could memorize, a clear system that would let them predict what humans would do in any given situation. Linda said that was exactly the problem. She said human morality couldn't be reduced to a flowchart or a decision tree. She said every situation required judgment, context, and the willingness to accept responsibility for your choices. Ryan asked if she was going to testify. Linda said yes. She said the council deserved an explanation even if they wouldn't like the answer. She said transparency was important, especially when you were trying to build trust with species who already feared you. 2 weeks later, Linda stood before the Galactic Council, in the same chamber where Vex Thor had testified months earlier. The delegates watched her with the same intense scrutiny, their various sensory organs all focused on the human captain, who had become a symbol of everything they found both admirable and terrifying about humanity. Speaker Talvreen opened the session by asking Linda to explain her actions during the freighter rescue. The speaker said, the council understood she had saved the Talasian crew. The speaker said the council appreciated that human intervention had prevented civilian casualties. But the speaker said the council was concerned that Linda had destroyed 3 raider vessels without attempting to disable or capture them first. Linda listened to the question through her translator and took a moment to organize her thoughts. Then she began to speak. She said she understood the council's concern. She said she knew that most species tried to minimize casualties, even in combat. She said she respected that galactic warfare had evolved to focus on economic and territorial objectives rather than wholesale destruction. But she said humanity had a different history. She said humans had fought wars that killed millions. She said they had developed weapons that could sterilize entire planets. She said they had learned through bitter experience that war was not a game with rules and referees. She said war was what happened when all other options failed, and people were going to die no matter what. She said that understanding that truth, really accepting it, changed how you approached combat. She said it made you more careful about starting fights. She said it made you more willing to find peaceful solutions. She said it made you value life more because you understood how easily it could be lost. But she said it also meant that when you did fight, you fought to win. You fought to protect the innocent. You fought to ensure that the threat was ended permanently, so it couldn't hurt anyone else. A delegate from the Xanthian Collective asked if that meant humans would always choose lethal force over capture. Linda said no. She said the Krethik raiders were alive and facing trial because they had surrendered. She said surrender was always an option. She said any enemy who stopped fighting and submitted to justice would be treated according to law and given fair trial. But she said the Orion Syndicate raiders had made a different choice. She said they had kept attacking even after the defiance was detected. She said they had kept trying to board the freighter even knowing that human reinforcements were minutes away. She said those actions told her everything she needed to know about their intent. Speaker Talvreen asked what those actions told her. Linda said they told her the raiders were willing to kill the freighter crew even if it meant dying themselves. She said that level of commitment to violence meant they were unlikely to surrender. She said attempting to disable their ships would have given them time to execute hostages or damage the freighter further. She said the fastest way to save the innocent was to eliminate the threat immediately. She paused, then added that she had made a judgment call. She said she had decided that the lives of the innocent freighter crew were worth more than the lives of pirates who were actively trying to commit murder. She said she stood by that decision and would make it again in the same circumstances. Counselor Thunder asked if Linda felt any regret for the deaths she had caused. Linda was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less certain. She said yes. She felt regret. She said every death was a tragedy, even the death of an enemy. She said she wished the raiders had made different choices. She said she wished they had valued life enough to surrender when confronted, but she said regret was not the same as guilt. She said she had not murdered anyone. She said she had stopped murderers from killing their victims. She said there was a profound difference between those two things. A junior delegate asked how humanity expected other species to understand when humans would show mercy and when they would not. Linda smiled, but it was a tired smile. She said she didn't expect other species to understand humanity perfectly. She said humans barely understood themselves sometimes. She said morality was complicated, and context mattered, and sometimes there were no good options, only less terrible ones. But she said there were some basic principles that could guide people. She said, if you were innocent, if you were trying to live peacefully, if you were the victim of aggression, then human mercy was absolute. She said humans would risk their lives to save you. She said humans would fight to protect you. She said humans would show you compassion, without expecting anything in return. But if you chose to be a predator, if you decided that hurting others was acceptable, if you refused every chance to stop and surrender, then you would discover where human mercy ended. She said that line was different in every situation because every situation involved different choices and different risks to innocent lives. She said the simplest way to avoid human wrath was to not attack the innocent. She said pirates who preyed on civilians would be stopped. She said governments that murdered their own people would be opposed. She said anyone who committed atrocities would face justice. And she said that sometimes justice meant capture and trial. And sometimes it meant immediate action to save lives. And humans would make that decision based on what protected the innocent, not what was convenient or expected. The council chamber was silent for a long moment after Linda finished speaking. Delegates consulted with their advisors. Some argued among themselves about what it all meant. Some looked troubled. Some looked thoughtful. Finally, Speaker Talvreen spoke. The speaker said the council would take Linda's testimony under advisement. The speaker said humanity would remain classified as selectively interventionist with extreme prejudice capabilities. The speaker said the council hoped that human forces would continue to assist in protecting civilian vessels and maintaining safe trade routes. The speaker did not say that the council endorsed human methods. The speaker did not say that humanity was right. But the speaker also did not say that humanity was wrong. Linda returned to the Defiance and resumed her patrol. The galaxy continued turning. Ships continued flying through the vast darkness between stars. And sometimes, when those ships found trouble, they sent out distress calls hoping someone would hear. More and more often, the ship that answered was human. And the price of that help, the price that the galaxy was slowly learning to understand, was not paid by those who called for rescue. It was paid by those who made the call necessary. It was paid by pirates and slavers and murderers who thought the darkness of space would hide their crimes. They learned, sometimes too late, that human warship mercy did exist. It existed for the innocent. It existed for those who surrendered. It existed for those who chose peace over violence. But it did not exist for predators who refused every chance to stop. It did not exist for those who valued profit over life. It did not exist for those who saw compassion as weakness and mercy as an invitation. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, painfully, one rescue at a time. And humanity, for all their fearsome reputation, for all their devastating weapons, for all their unpredictable nature, was teaching the universe a lesson that no other species had managed to convey. They were teaching that strength without compassion was tyranny. They were teaching that compassion without strength was meaningless. They were teaching that the most dangerous warrior was not the one who knew only violence, but the one who understood both violence and mercy and knew exactly when to use each. And they were teaching that when you sent an SOS to Earth, when you called for human help in your darkest moment, the price would be paid. Justice would be served. The innocent would be protected. But that price would never be paid by those asking for help. It would be paid by those who made help necessary. And it would be paid in full.